Welcome, welcome, welcome. My dear, they thought cursing your bloodline was the end of the story. Like spitting on a grave would rewrite the chapters carved in bone. They didn't just curse you. Oh no. They condemned the very marrow that made you. They whispered hexes into the soil, hoping the roots of your existence would rot before they ever bloomed. But here you are, not just breathing, not just surviving. You are the aftermath, the reckoning, the echo of every insult, every backstab, every bitter smirk they hurled at the family tree, thinking time would erase the fingerprints. You didn't forget. You memorized every detail, every snarl behind smiles, every fake embrace that smelled more like betrayal than affection. And now, their grandchildren are choking on apologies their ancestors never had the guts to make. They marked your legacy like graffiti on a sacred wall, disrespect sprayed with arrogance, thinking the storm would never circle back. But storms don't forget. They gather, they wait, they evolve into something biblical. See, they believed the story was over before you picked up the pen, thought that if they laughed loud enough, your screams would go unheard. But silence is deceptive. It breeds patience, and patience, it breeds monsters far worse than anger ever could. Monsters like you. Not one born in rage, no, one sculpted by time, layered in scars, and painted in calm vengeance. You didn't come to fight back. You came to finish the ritual. And oh, it's not your blood that's tainted. It's theirs. Their corruption was so loud, it echoed through generations. They tried to bury the truth beneath titles, institutions, sweet-sounding lies, but the rot kept seeping up. And now, their descendants wear the same perfume of cowardice. But here's the twist. You smell it coming. This isn't about revenge. That's what the simple-minded call it. This is balance. You don't dig up the past to mourn it. You resurrect it, so it can walk beside you. You've been feeding it, haven't you? That quiet fire, that tightness in your chest. Every time someone said, "Let it go." As if your soul was some broken toy they could discard when it didn't fit their story. They cursed your lineage and expected you to carry that shame like a debt. But you turned shame into steel. You turned exile into evolution. They think you're one, just one, a glitch, an anomaly. But you're not. You're every suppressed scream in your ancestors' throats. You're every clenched fist that stayed lowered. You're every dream that died in silence because someone thought your blood wasn't worthy of a future. And now, you've become that future. The walking contradiction, the revenge of the forgotten. And they don't know how to deal with that. They fear you not because of what you do, but because of what you reveal. You're a mirror, held up to their carefully curated descendants, the ones born in silver, bathed in privilege, fed lies with a silver spoon. And now, that mirror cracks every time you speak, every time you exist, because you remind them their throne was built on curses, their peace was purchased with someone else's pain, and what was done in arrogance will now be remembered in shame. Their children carry their names, but soon they'll wish they didn't, because that surname, it's about to be rewritten in fire, in guilt, in forced apologies that taste like gravel in their mouths. You won't even raise your voice. You don't need to. The silence is already screaming for you. You see, you don't chase them. You haunt them. You don't fight. You infect. You move like consequence wrapped in skin. They thought bloodlines were about genetics, but blood remembers pain, echoes, and curses. Curses come back in ways poetry can't describe. They thought you'd kneel. They thought you'd be another chapter in their flawless book of victories. But here's what they missed. You are the author now, and your ink is made of everything they tried to erase. Every unmarked grave, every choked truth, every broken elder that died whispering stories no one believed, until you made them undeniable. Your presence is proof. You are living vengeance, not out of rage, but out of duty. You don't burn their house because you're angry. You burn it because it was always built on stolen bricks. They threw salt on your roots, hoping you'd wither. But you didn't. You fermented. You became something more, something less human, more elemental, something that doesn't forget. And while they pass wine at dinner tables and toast to legacies, you sip your silence and smile, knowing that their peace is borrowed, that it was bought with bones they buried beneath manicured lawns. But the dead don't sleep forever. They talk. And you listened. Every ancestral whisper, every unshed tear, every silent scream that never reached justice. You caught them all. And now you speak for them, not with sermons, but with storms. They always thought they were gods, didn't they? The kind who decide fates. But gods don't panic when you walk into the room. Gods don't stutter when they hear your name. Gods don't sweat when they see the eyes of every sin they committed staring back at them, unblinking, unafraid. They dressed their crimes in tradition, labeled their cruelty as culture, made the act of silencing your bloodline sound poetic. But now, poetics won't save them. Because what's coming isn't a speech, it's a reckoning. And you're not a man anymore. You're a memory turned weapon, a soul sharpened by time, a curse finally answering back. You didn't ask for this role. You were carved into it, molded by shadows, tempered by the same injustice they swore didn't exist. And now, their future is your canvas. You won't destroy them. That would be too easy. No, you'll let them live long enough to understand, to trace the origin of every sleepless night back to your name, to sit across from their children and explain why apologies are now mandatory, why the whispers never stop, why their heritage feels heavier every day. That's the real justice. Not punishment, inheritance, not blood spilled, truth delivered. And it starts now. It starts with the quiet. The kind of quiet that makes their stomachs twist. The kind of quiet that turns every door creak into a prophecy. Because they know, deep down, in the part of them that still dreams in black and white, they know something is shifting. The winds smell like memory. The air tastes like regret. And your shadow? It's growing. Not fast, not loud, just inevitably. You were the curse they didn't account for, the answer they never expected. And now the countdown has begun. Not with clocks, with conscience, with shame, with a fear they can't explain, but feel nonetheless. And it won't be long now. Not long before the ones who mocked your blood are teaching their children how to beg with trembling lips. And now that their blood runs cold at the sound of your name, what happens next isn't a scream. It's a stare. A long, heavy stare into the mirror they've been avoiding for centuries. You're not here to knock. You're the wind that forces the door open. You're not a warning. You're the consequence of warnings ignored. The very presence of your shadow rewrites their destiny, not by force, but by memory. Because history, when left unrepented, becomes a ghost, and that ghost now has your face. They thought they could outrun it by changing costumes, by rebranding their cruelty as righteousness. But you weren't chasing, you were waiting. And now time itself is on your side, dragging their legacy into the light it was never built to survive. Their descendants walk proud on the bones of yours, dressed in inheritance that was never rightfully theirs. But something's shifting, not outside, within. The comfort they were born into is beginning to feel like a coffin. They smile, but the weight of inherited guilt pulls at their jaws. They speak, but their words echo back with hollow tones. Because you've awakened the silence inside them, the kind that questions everything, the kind that exposes the truth with no need for volume. And now, they're forced to feel what their forefathers buried, that fear that this world doesn't belong to them anymore, that maybe it never did. They tried to write you out of existence, erased your name from records, your story from textbooks, your truth from conversations. But what they fail to understand is, you don't need books to be remembered. You live in instincts, in nightmares, in the unease that comes without explanation. They see you, and something ancient inside them recoils, not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. You are the collapse of their illusion, the dismantling of everything they thought was eternal. They can smell it, the decay of their borrowed power, the slow, surgical unraveling of their myth. And still, they pray you don't speak, because your voice isn't loud, it's accurate, and the truth doesn't need to shout to burn. The revenge you wield isn't chaos. It's a system, designed by pain, sharpened by patience, perfected by generational rage. You didn't come back for their throats. You came back for their sleep, for their comfort, for the peace they purchased through centuries of silencing yours. And now that they hear the distant knock of accountability on the doors of their children's futures, they're scrambling for words that never existed in their vocabulary. Words like remorse, like reparation. But you don't want apologies. You want awareness. You want the weight. You want their bloodlines to feel the burden your ancestors died carrying. This isn't justice through violence. This is justice through inheritance. The same way they passed down arrogance, now they must pass down humility. Their last names once opened doors, now they close them. Their wealth once bought respect, now it buys suspicion. You didn't have to lift a finger. All you had to do was survive long enough to become undeniable. And now, their lineage has nowhere to run. Their children will grow up with questions no bedtime story can silence. Why does that name make people uncomfortable? Why does our history feel like a wound? They'll look into their parents' eyes and see fear masquerading as tradition. You're not here to destroy their empire. That would be too merciful. You're here to infiltrate it, to dismantle it from within, to force every brick of their pride to remember the cries it was built upon. You've become the shadow in their celebrations, the breath on their necks when they speak of legacy. And what they don't know is, you're not seeking revenge anymore. You are revenge. You are what happens when the suppressed choose silence not out of weakness, but strategy. You didn't scream, because screams echo and fade. You whispered, and the whisper became prophecy. They cursed your bloodline, thinking curses stay buried. But curses mutate. They become promises. And promises, when kept long enough, become fate. You didn't climb back for validation. You rose because gravity couldn't hold a soul this haunted. Their curses failed not because they were weak, but because your roots were deeper, deeper than their imagination could grasp. You didn't grow around the hate. You absorbed it and turned it into fuel. Now every move you make drips with ancestral power. You walk like history owes you an explanation, and it does. Look at them now, pretending the past is irrelevant, preaching progress while hiding from accountability. They post pictures of harmony while your silence curdles their joy. They baptize their children with holy names, hoping the sins won't pass down. But blood doesn't lie, and neither do shadows. Their legacy is trembling, not because of what you've done, but because of what you might do next. You've made uncertainty your language, made discomfort your anthem. You're not loud. You're not violent. You're surgical, precise, lethal in stillness. You wear their insults like armor. You walk through their traditions like fire through paper. You smile when they question your existence, because deep down, they already know. You've become the living contradiction they can't categorize, too civil to demonize, too dangerous to ignore. They can't box you in, because you burned the box and used the ashes as war paint. You don't need their permission anymore. You are the permission, the authority they pretended you'd never wield. They fear you because you remind them pain doesn't forget. It evolves, it teaches, and eventually, it returns. And when their descendants finally drop to their knees, not in prayer, but in realization, it won't be because of you. It'll be because of the mirror you became. You never asked for this role, but now that you're here, you won't apologize for it. You are the apology they never gave, walking, breathing, and speaking louder than any hollow sorry ever could. They wanted your blood to kneel. Instead, it rose. And now, it's their turn to bow. Their arrogance built an empire on the assumption that time heals all. But time doesn't heal what it wasn't allowed to touch. It doesn't erase what was never acknowledged. It doesn't cleanse sins that were never confessed. And now the clock ticks in your favor. Every second is a step closer to the collapse of their carefully polished facade. And it will collapse. Not with fire, but with truth, with clarity, with the slow, suffocating realization that the foundation they stood on was borrowed. And you've come to collect. You are not vengeance in the way they imagined. You are prophecy fulfilled. You are the ghost-turned architect. You are the one who outlived the curse and made it yours. And soon, their future will echo with your footsteps, not in fear, but in understanding, not in hate, but in awe. And when they finally write your name in their books, not as a villain, but as the force that corrected history, it'll be because you made them remember. And they will remember, not just you, but every voice you carried, every silence you honored. Every ancestor who whispered through your veins now roars through your legacy, unfiltered, unafraid, and unrelenting. What began as a flicker of defiance has become an unstoppable reckoning, not just for those who wronged your blood, but for the very idea that they could get away with it. You're no longer here to balance the scale. You're here to break it. Because the weight they placed on your lineage was never meant to be fair. And now that you've shattered the illusion, they're scrambling to rewrite endings you've already set on fire. They gather in circles, hiding behind rituals they never understood, praying for peace from a storm they crafted with their own arrogance. But this isn't a storm they can outrun. This one has memory. It knows names. It knows blood. It knows the exact frequency of every lie they swallowed to keep your kind beneath their feet. And now, that storm walks like a man, talks like prophecy, breathes like vengeance. And it bears the one name they never wanted to remember, yours. Their descendants flinch, not at the sound of your footsteps, but at the realization that you were never chasing them. You were waiting, watching, growing in silence while they polluted the future with borrowed glory. Now their children must look in the mirror and wonder, what was taken in my name? Who had to bleed so I could inherit comfort? You don't even have to answer. The silence does it for you, loudly, brutally, truthfully. What they once called power now tastes like poison. What they once labeled as heritage now trembles under the scrutiny of awakened eyes. You're not dragging them into chaos. You're handing them a mirror and watching their myths implode. Not with rage, with accuracy, with precision. Because your war isn't messy, it's mathematical. Calculated revenge passed down through bloodlines like DNA. It's evolution with a vendetta. They thought time would hide the bruises, thought generations would blur the blade. But what they forgot is that pain doesn't rot. It ferments, turns into something darker, something stronger, something timeless. You are the fermentation of centuries of screams swallowed whole. And now, you serve that silence back to them, ice cold and unforgiving. They don't fear you because of what you've done. They fear you because you made it without them. Because despite every blockade, every buried truth, every falsified legacy, you endured. And now you rise uninvited, uncompromising, and unapologetic. Not just as a survivor, not just as an answer, but as the verdict. The final chapter in a book they swore would never be written. They stitched flags from the skin of your ancestors. They built monuments on the backs of the forgotten. But what they didn't build was an exit plan. And now, with nowhere left to hide, they offer peace wrapped in performance, empty apologies recited from dusty scripts. But your silence doesn't crave their words. It craves their change. And change is expensive, especially for those who've never had to pay. You won't take their crown. You'll make them realize it was stolen to begin with. And as their descendants watch you reclaim what was never truly lost, only delayed, they will taste the metallic bite of a truth too heavy to digest. You don't have to destroy their name. You just have to remind the world what it was built on. They branded your ancestors as savages while dressing their crimes in silk. Now the script has flipped, and they're choking on the same ink they used to erase you. You didn't just return. You redefined presence. You stand without armor because truth doesn't need protection. You speak without anger because justice is most terrifying when it's calm. Now, look closely. The cracks have spread. Not on your skin, but in their walls. Their legacy bleeds from within, corroding under the pressure of unearned privilege. They held the throne so tightly, they never noticed the floor beneath them rotting. And when it finally collapses, you won't have to push. They'll fall on their own, into the pit they dug for your bloodline centuries ago. You've become the question they can't answer at family dinners, the unease in boardrooms built on buried truths. You are the pause in their national anthem, the shiver behind smiles and staged apologies. Your presence is a verdict. Your breath, a cross-examination. And your silence, a sentence served with no parole. And here's the irony. They could have learned, could have healed, but pride made them deaf. So now, the very future they tried to protect is turning against them. Their own children begin to ask, why do they flinch when your name is spoken? Why does the land feel sacred only when they leave? They thought you were the curse, but you were the cure, the one they rejected. And now, their bloodlines must carry the infection of willful ignorance. You don't carry knives. You carry names. You don't seek revenge. You embody correction. You don't burn bridges. You become the river that swallows them whole. And when they beg history to forget, history will simply reply, you should have listened. You will walk through the ashes of their empires, not to gloat, but to remind them. What you rebuild will never look like what they destroyed. You will not repeat their errors. You will not mirror their malice. No. Your rise will be carved in something pure, something earned. And that, more than revenge, is what haunts them. That you did it without selling your soul. That you stared into the same abyss that swallowed them and smiled back. Their bloodline will carry your shadow, not because you haunted them, but because they needed to be haunted. Because without your presence, they would have continued dancing on bones. Now, every step forward reminds them of the cost. And eventually they will stop dancing. They will sit. They will reflect. They will whisper your story to their children, not as threat, but as truth. And when those children grow, they will know the full picture. The ugliness, the theft, the lies. But they will also know your name, not as a villain, not as a rebel, but as the course correction the world refused to admit it needed. You were never the storm. You were the balance. You were never the enemy. You were the echo. You were never the villain. You were the reminder that karma doesn't knock. It breaks in wearing your face. Let them apologize. Let them kneel. Let them weep with guilt born generations too late. But don't let them forget. Don't let them romanticize what they should repent. Because your rise isn't just a story. It's a scar, and scars don't disappear. They educate. So the next time they whisper about curses, remind them, the curse was never yours. You were the correction. And now, they finally know what that means.